You're not dressed like someone important, the branch manager sneered, waving Naomi's ID like it was fake. Come back when you have real documents, assuming this even is your account. What no one in that bank realized was that the woman they just humiliated wasn't just a customer, she was the president of the entire institution, and the reckoning had already begun. She didn't pull up in a luxury SUV. She didn't wear a tailored blazer or carry a leather-bound portfolio. There was no assistant announcing her name, no boardroom badge clipped to her collar. Just a woman, Naomi Jefferson, 51 years old, dressed in a tan sweater, black jeans, and sneakers, stepping through the glass doors of the Hillview branch of Briarwood Trust and Savings Bank in Charlotte, North Carolina. Keys in one hand. A slim purse in the other. Her posture was easy. No rush. No power play. And that was entirely by design. Naomi had learned a long time ago that the truest version of a place often reveals itself when no one knows who's watching. The Hillview branch was polished on the surface, neatly arranged rows of full leather chairs, a complimentary coffee station in the corner, a small wall-mounted TV quietly playing financial news. Fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead. The air smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and printer toner. 2 customers filled out deposit slips near the window. Another scrolled his phone, earbuds in. Naomi took her place in line behind a man wearing an HVAC work uniform, chatting casually with the teller. She waited, still and quiet, soaking in everything, the pace, the tone, the body language behind the counter. When it was her turn, she stepped up with a calm, polite smile. "Good morning," she said gently. "I'd like to make a withdrawal from my personal account." The teller, a young man no older than 22, looked up from his screen. His name tag read Evan. His smile was cautious but kind. "Sure, ma'am. May I see your ID and account number?" Naomi handed him both. Her driver's license. Her Briarwood account slip. Everything in perfect order. Evan began typing her information into the system when the sharp clack of heels interrupted. "Evan," came a firm voice. "Let me handle this." A woman in a navy sheath dress and crisp blazer stepped up beside the counter, her heels echoing across the tiled floor like a gavel. Mid-40s, angular. Face, cool eyes, a silver brooch pinned just above her heart. Her name tag read Cynthia Lasker, branch manager. She glanced at the ID in Evan's hand, then at Naomi, then back again. Her lips curled slightly. "I'm sorry," she said with that thin, too polished tone. "We won't be able to process that withdrawal today." Naomi blinked, puzzled. "Is there a problem with the account?" "Let's just say," Cynthia replied with a chuckle so dry it felt pre-rehearsed, "we've had situations. People pretending to be someone they're not. Large withdrawals. Fraudulent activity. You know how it goes." Naomi didn't flinch. "My account is in good standing," she said evenly. "I can provide additional verification if needed." Cynthia's smile tightened, but not in a way that welcomed conversation. "I'm sure you think so," she said. "But this ID? It doesn't quite match." She gestured vaguely at Naomi's clothes. "And we've been advised to exercise discretion when anything feels off." It was that word. Feels. Not facts. Not verification. Not policy. Just Cynthia's feelings. Naomi took a quiet breath, centering herself. "Ms. Lasker," she said calmly, "have you actually pulled up my account in the system?" "I don't need to," Cynthia replied, crossing her arms. "I've worked in banking long enough to know when something doesn't line up." Naomi held her gaze. "And what exactly doesn't line up? The ID with my face? The account number? Or the way I'm dressed?" "Look," Cynthia said with a dismissive wave, "if you're really this person, you can come back with an appointment, bring a second form of ID, maybe a business card." She turned on her heel. "Evan, you can move on to the next customer." Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't step forward. She simply reached into her purse and tapped the screen of her phone. "One call." Not loud. Not for show. Just a quiet signal that things were about to change. Cynthia had already disappeared into her glass-walled office, her back turned to the room. Utterly convinced she'd just protected the branch from a fraud attempt. But something in Evan's face had shifted. His brow furrowed. He glanced down at the ID again. Then at Naomi. Something wasn't adding up. Quietly, he typed her name into the system. A moment passed. Then his fingers froze over the keyboard. The color drained from his face. He looked up, slowly. "Ma'am," he said, voice lower now, "your profile, it says. Naomi Jefferson, president of Briarwood Bank." The man in the HVAC uniform turned his head. The woman near the deposit slip stopped writing. The entire lobby, still only half filled, seemed to hold its breath. Naomi gave Evan a half-smile. Not smug. Not angry. Just patient. "I didn't want to announce myself," she said. "But now that we're here, can you confirm if there's anything in the system that would prevent me from making a simple withdrawal?" Evan shook his head. "No, ma'am. Your account is fully active. Executive access level." "Thank you." She looked past the teller counter, toward Cynthia's office. The woman was still turned away, making a show of reviewing papers she didn't need to look at. Naomi didn't move. Not yet. The shift had begun. The energy in the room wasn't loud. It was heavy. Quiet tension. Respect beginning to creep in. A slow, dawning realization that something important was happening. "Evan," Naomi said softly, "did she ask you to check my account before stepping in?" "No," he replied. "She just took over." Naomi nodded once. "And has she returned to verify anything yet?" Evan shook his head again. "She said it wasn't necessary." Naomi took a step back from the counter but didn't leave. She waited. Still calm. Still composed. Her phone was still in her hand, but she hadn't made the call yet. Not fully. Not the one that would set the next domino in motion. One of the customers, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses and a checkbook, leaned over slightly. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "that woman was way out of line." Naomi smiled gently. "Thank you. I'm handling it." And she was. But the branch didn't know that yet. Not until the next call. Not until the next arrival. Not until Cynthia Lasker learned exactly who she had tried to turn away at the counter because of nothing more than a tan sweater and a quiet voice. Evan was still staring at the screen, pale and blinking, as if the truth of Naomi Jefferson's identity had smacked the wind right out of him. The lobby, once filled with subtle movement, pens scratching on deposit slips, fingers tapping on phones, was now still. Frozen. No one said it aloud, but every single person could feel it. Something had just shifted. And then, the glass door to Cynthia Lasker's office opened. She stepped out, clipboard in hand, walking with the forced confidence of someone who had no idea her authority was seconds away from collapsing. "Is there still an issue?" she asked, her eyes flicking between Naomi and Evan. Naomi's voice was smooth, calm, even. Evan pulled up the account. "It confirms who I am. You can process the withdrawal now." Cynthia gave a short, sarcastic laugh, like she was humoring a child. "Miss Jefferson, was it?" She didn't even try to hide the doubt in her tone. "Let's not pretend typing a name into a system proves anything. You show up here dressed like someone running weekend errands and expect us to believe you're in charge of this bank?" She gestured toward Naomi's sweater like it offended her. Naomi didn't flinch. "I don't recall professionalism being defined by a clothing label. What I do recall is protocol. And protocol states that identification should be verified through the system before making any determination." Cynthia crossed her arms. "Protocol also calls for good judgment." "No," Naomi corrected softly. "It calls for verification. You skipped that. You didn't ask a single follow-up question." You made assumptions based on how I look, not who I am. The silence in the room thickened. Cynthia looked around, suddenly aware that the room wasn't just a background, it was an audience. The man in the HVAC shirt had stood up a little straighter. The woman with the checkbook was still watching closely, eyes narrowed. And Evan, now looking deeply uncomfortable, glanced down at his keyboard again, perhaps hoping it would erase what he'd witnessed. "This isn't about you," Cynthia said, her voice rising ever so slightly. "It's about following process. You didn't make an appointment, you brought no assistant, no official documentation. Frankly, this feels like a setup." Naomi tilted her head. "That's the part you still don't understand. I didn't need to set anything up. You did that all on your own." The lobby doors opened with a gust of warm air. Two individuals stepped inside, both in dark suits. One was tall, broad-shouldered, with a perfectly knotted tie and a presence that spoke of executive weight. The other was a woman with a tight bun and a leather folder under her arm. Cynthia's eyes narrowed. Naomi didn't even turn. She already knew. "Malik," she said quietly. "Angela." "Ms. Jefferson," Malik Drayton, Briarwood's regional VP, said as he stepped forward. "We got here as fast as we could." "Appreciated," Naomi replied. She stepped slightly to the side. "You'll want to speak to your branch manager." Cynthia's eyebrows raised sharply. "Excuse me? This is my branch. You can't just walk in here and we've already seen the security footage," Angela Knox from HR interrupted. Her voice was flat, professional, lethal. "Audio included. We have confirmation of your statements and your refusal to verify the client's identity through official systems." She didn't act like an executive. Cynthia snapped, the cool control from earlier now cracking at the edges. "She came in here trying to provoke something, and I did what I was trained to do. I protected this branch." Malik didn't blink. "You were trained to verify before you judge. Not to assume. Not to dismiss. Not to escalate without cause." Cynthia's voice dropped a half step. "So that's it? I'm being fired because she's the president?" "No," Angela said firmly. "You're being terminated because you violated policy, showed personal bias, and created an unsafe, hostile environment for both a client and your staff. That's not leadership. That's liability." For a second, Cynthia just stood there. Her mouth moved slightly like she was searching for a retort, a rebuttal, a justification that would soften what was now irreversible. But there was nothing. Naomi looked at her, not with cruelty, not even with anger, but with measured clarity. "I could have fired you the moment I walked in," she said. "But I needed you to understand why. Not because of my title, but because of the culture we're shaping, one that cannot be built on assumptions and ego." Cynthia's posture slumped just slightly. Her eyes darted to the staff, Evan, Melissa, Henry at the far counter, and Jordan, the assistant manager, who had stepped into the room from the hallway but hadn't spoken a word. They all looked stunned. But more than that, they looked changed. Angela motioned toward the back hallway. "You'll be escorted out. HR will follow up with your transition paperwork." Cynthia didn't argue. Not out loud. But her face said everything. The bitterness. The shock. The disbelief that someone she underestimated so thoroughly could undo her career with nothing but quiet authority and the truth. As the glass door shut behind her, the room seemed to breathe for the first time. Malik turned to the remaining staff. "You all okay?" Evan nodded slowly. Melissa looked shaken. Jordan stared at the floor. Naomi stepped forward, addressing them not as a superior, but as a colleague. "This morning wasn't about Cynthia," she said. "It was about what happens when power isn't used responsibly. It was about what gets revealed when assumptions are left unchecked." I didn't know what to do," Evan said, his voice cracking slightly. "I saw something was wrong, but you trusted your training," Naomi replied. "And when you saw a contradiction, you checked. That matters." That's the beginning of accountability. She made us all feel like questioning her would get us in trouble, Melissa added, almost in a whisper. You're not wrong, Naomi said. That's how toxic leadership works. It creates fear. Silences instincts. That ends today. Malik looked at Naomi, then at the rest of the branch. There's going to be a full debrief. HR will speak with each of you. But before that, Naomi? She nodded. I'll address the team in the break room in 15 minutes. Then she turned, eyes scanning the lobby one last time. The coffee station. The framed mission statement on the wall. The client still quietly watching. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't made a scene. And yet every person in the room would leave that day remembering the moment the temperature changed, not with volume, but with presence. Naomi Jefferson had come into the branch as a stranger. But now, every soul in that room understood exactly who she was, and more importantly, what she stood for. The break room was quiet. No hum of casual conversation. No refrigerator buzzing in the background. Just the low shuffle of shoes and the hesitant pull of chairs as Naomi Jefferson stepped inside, followed by the Hillview branch staff who, only an hour ago, saw her as just another customer. Now, they sat around the round table with the air of people who knew they were part of something bigger than policy or protocol. Evan, still visibly shaken, sat with his hands folded tightly in his lap. Melissa, the senior teller, pulled her sweater sleeves over her wrists like she was trying to disappear. Henry leaned forward slightly, arms crossed not in defiance, but in regret. And Jordan, the assistant manager who had watched it all unfold from the sidelines, stood with his back against the wall, silent. Naomi didn't sit at the head of the table. She chose a seat between Melissa and Evan, leveled with them, eye to eye. I want to thank each of you for staying, she said, her voice low, her tone more maternal than corporate. I know today wasn't easy. But this isn't about punishing a mistake. It's about understanding the weight of what we carry, every day, in every interaction. No one moved. No one looked away. I started in banking when I was 19, she continued. Teller trainee at a branch in Baton Rouge. No title. No power. Just a polyester blazer 2 sizes too big and a dream to prove myself. And back then, I learned real quick that not everyone offers you respect until you force them to. She paused, let that land. But even more dangerous than people who refuse to offer respect are the people who withhold it based on how someone looks, what they wear, or what they assume they are. Evan finally looked up. I should have said something sooner. I knew something felt off when Cynthia stepped in, but I froze. I thought, if I challenged her, I'd lose my job. Naomi nodded gently. Fear of rocking the boat has capsized more good people than bad policy ever will. But the fact that you recognized it? That's where change starts. Melissa's voice came next, small but steady. I've worked under Cynthia for 6 years. We've seen her shut people down before, just not someone in a leadership role. Honestly, if I didn't know who you were, I probably would have stayed silent too. And that's what we need to talk about, Naomi said. What happens when no one important is watching? Because that's who we really are, not in front of clients or auditors or district managers. In here. She tapped her fingers softly on the table. Inside these walls. Jordan shifted near the back. I saw it happening. I saw Evan hesitate, saw Cynthia shut it down, and I still didn't step in. I'm the assistant manager. I should have done something. Naomi turned to him. You're doing something now. And that means more than silence ever will. For a moment, the room just breathed, people slowly lowering their guards, the kind of quiet that holds more truth than shouting ever could. Naomi stood then, slow and steady, not to leave, but to anchor her message. Here's what's going to happen. Starting next week, we're rolling out new training across all branches, focused not just on policy, but empathy, equity, and awareness. It won't be a PowerPoint slideshow or a check-the-box exercise. It's going to be face-to-face, conversation-driven, and I'll personally sit in on every first session at each location. She scanned their eyes. Because this wasn't a one-branch problem. It's a culture problem. And culture starts with leadership. Evan nodded slowly. Melissa sat up straighter. Even Jordan uncrossed his arms. I want each of you to understand, Naomi added, I didn't come here looking for someone to fire. I came here to see what was real. And what I saw is that fear can silence good people. But it doesn't have to stay that way. She let out a breath and walked to the door. Give yourselves a few minutes. I'll meet everyone in the lobby shortly. When she stepped out into the main floor, the clients were mostly gone. A few remained, quiet observers who had witnessed a lesson they hadn't expected to see inside a local bank. The room smelled faintly of cinnamon from the break room's Keurig pod. But the energy was different now. Settled. Present. Real. Naomi gave a small nod to the security guard by the door, then walked to the center of the lobby. A moment later, her team followed. Evan. Melissa. Henry. Jordan. Even Leonard from the back office emerged. Naomi didn't stand behind the counter or in front of her staff. She stood with them. Among them. And then, in that soft but unmistakably firm voice that now held the weight of everything they just experienced, she said, Before I leave, I need to say something to all of you, and I hope it stays with you longer than this moment. Heads lifted. Eyes locked in. We talk a lot about leadership, what it looks like, what it sounds like. We train it in modules and mention it in slogans. But real leadership? She paused. It looks like opening the door for someone who's had a rough morning. It looks like speaking up when something doesn't feel right, even if your voice shakes. It looks like refusing to stand by while someone's dignity is stripped away. Her eyes swept the lobby. And it especially looks like treating every customer, every colleague, like they matter. Not because of what's in their account or what title they hold, but because it's the right thing to do. A few employees looked down, but not in shame, in reflection. Today could have been something we all pretended didn't happen. Something we quietly put in the vault and hope no one talks about again. But it wasn't. Because we chose to face it. And that's where real growth begins. She took one final breath, then added, From this day forward, I want you to treat every guest who walks through these doors like they might be walking into a boardroom tomorrow to make a decision about your future. And if you treat them differently based on that possibility, then you weren't treating them right in the first place. The silence afterward wasn't empty, it was reverent. Melissa wiped at the corner of her eye. Evan gave a single nod, jaw tight with something like pride. Jordan stood taller. Naomi offered them all a warm look, not one of dismissal, but of solidarity. Then she picked up her purse, nodded once, and walked toward the door. No driver waiting. No executive escort. Just a woman in a tan sweater who had reminded everyone inside that building what respect looks like when titles disappear, and the truth is all that's left. And as the glass door closed behind her, something lingered in the room, something stronger than procedure. Integrity. The kind that reshapes culture. The kind that leaves echoes long after the footsteps fade. As the author of this story, I want to take a moment to reflect on the deeper message behind Naomi Jefferson's experience at the Hillview branch. What happened in that bank wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a reflection of how quickly we're willing to judge others based on what they look like instead of who they are. Naomi walked in wearing casual clothes, with no entourage or title pinned to her chest, and because of that, she was dismissed. Disrespected. Assumed to be unimportant. And yet, she never raised her voice. She never flaunted her authority. She simply stood firm in her truth until that truth spoke for itself. The lesson here isn't just about leadership. It's about how we treat people when we think no one's watching. It's about the quiet, everyday moments, behind the counter, on the job, and passing conversations, where bias can take root and where courage has the chance to bloom. Too often, people in positions of power act out of assumption, not accountability. But real power lies in restraint. In humility. and the ability to choose respect over reaction, empathy over ego. Naomi reminded us that leadership isn't always about titles or corner offices, it's about character. And culture isn't built in memos or mission statements. It's built in the way we look at one another, listen to one another, and stand up when something's not right. To anyone listening or watching this story, if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or shut down because of how you presented yourself, know this: you are not alone. And your worth has never been measured by someone else's ability to see it. And to those who've hesitated to speak up when they saw injustice unfold, this is your invitation to be braver next time. Because even the smallest voice, used at the right moment, can change the temperature of a room. On behalf of U.S. Instructive Stories, thank you for taking the time to listen. Thank you for valuing stories that don't just entertain, but challenge, reveal, and inspire. If this story moved you, we hope you'll carry its lesson with you and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the world doesn't change in big moments alone, it changes when ordinary people choose to act with integrity, even when no one's watching. We appreciate you. Stay strong, stay kind, and until next time, keep standing for what's right.